Hallo und herzlich willkommen wieder, liebe Freundinnen und Freunde, bei Carl-Auer Sounds of Science, dem Podcast im Carl-Auer Magazin. Unser heutiger Gast ist Richard Hill, australischer Neurowissenschaftler und Psychotherapeut. Er hat gemeinsam mit Ernest L. Rossi, dem Herausgeber der Gesammelten Schriften von Milton Erickson, ein Buch verfasst mit dem Titel Mirroring Hands. Und was es mit Mirroring Hands auf sich hat, welche neurobiologischen und quantenphysikalischen Hintergründe dabei eine Rolle spielen, dazu gibt er Auskunft im Gespräch mit Carl-Auer Sounds of Science und auch welche Rolle dabei Hypnose und Hypnotherapie spielen. Wir wünschen viele interessante Einsichten im Gespräch mit Richard Hill bei Carl-Auer Sounds of Science. Hello and welcome, Richard Hill, from the other side of the world, isn't it? Where are you?
It is. Hello, Matthias. It's wonderful to see you again. I'm sitting in Sydney, Australia.
Okay. I just asked you when we met each other, did you have a good flight? But there is no flight necessary now.
Yes, I know. I walked all the way from the bathroom into the living room.
Okay. Richard, it's fun that you have time to talk about your book that is just coming now in a German edition that you wrote together with Ernest Rossi. We'll speak about Ernest later in the time, but I directly want to start with the technique that you call mirroring hands. And it's very, very interesting to see, and for some people surprising. What is it? You call it a responsive or client's responsive technique. So what does that mean for a therapeutical technique like mirroring hands to be responsive?
This is such a seemingly simple question, but it's a fascinating concept that I took to immediately. And one of the reasons why I took to immediately this idea of being client responsive, meaning the other person responsive, is because I was an actor for 25 years.
You were an actor?
Yeah. And interestingly, our dear friend Ernest Rossi took 2 years of acting classes with Lee Strasberg in order to improve his connection. And what it means is that it's really something that I am going to be pushing for the rest of my life and working at. I think it's a step ahead or a next step from Rogers, where we make people person-centered, where you're actually truly acknowledging that the therapeutic session is co-created. And in fact, it is the client that is providing the most important initial information.
Yeah.
Now, certainly the therapist is required to then respond to that information that the client provides with all the experience and knowledge and assistance that the client is looking for. But it is extraordinary how much we will help the client by telling them how much we know and taking them down a therapeutic pathway that we have great confidence in and good references and so on and so forth to validate, only to find that we're not getting the great success that we need. So the client responsiveness starts with curiosity.
With what?
Curiosity.
With curiosity. Okay, sorry.
No, so to be genuinely curious about what it is that the client has brought into the space.
Yeah.
And genuinely appreciating that you don't know. That as a therapist, I don't know. I'm going to be making some fabulous educated guesses and sensitive calculated responses. But it is in the client. And we use a number of techniques in order to do that process. But principally, we start with that curiosity. I wonder if you are going to do this. And I wonder, will you do this? And are you ready for so-and-so? And we use this extraordinarily simple technique called the open-ended sentence, where we might just say to a client, I can see that you're quite, and in that little pause, they will fill that pause. Now, what they will very often do is tell you what they really feel, because of course I might see a client who's anxious, and I'll say, "Now I've watched you, and I'm seeing that you're very anxious at the moment. Now, that's a beautiful thing to say. But they then go, oh, well, I must be there. So I will be. And people, obviously, the first question is, what if your client says, well, I don't know how, what are you leaving a gap there for? You're supposed to tell me what to do. I say, oh, you would like me to tell you what I think? Well, I'm actually thinking you're quite anxious. How do you feel about that? So even when the client says, tell me what you think, you don't tell them what you think until they say it, or show it. Sometimes they show it in their body movements as well.
So if you start with that question that you said, then that you let the client start, then the role of the therapist comes into an interaction process somehow. Okay.
It's very much like acting. We used to say someone who gives back their piece of dialogue after the other person has said theirs, and then they wait till they say theirs in return. That's called a wooden actor. And I think that we have a lot of wooden therapists who have good hearts and good intent, but what they're doing is they're just waiting for the client to say what they need to say, and they're going, oh, I know what's going on here, and they come in just maybe a little bit too soon.
Yeah. Well, now we go to the name mirroring hands. So the hands play a quite central role in this special technique, and this special client responsive technique. So we don't have the possibility here. We see each other, but people just listen to our talk. We don't have the possibility to show something, but maybe you have an idea to bring something to point what really happens with the hands. How can I imagine what happens with the hands when I use mirroring hands technique? And
so the mirroring hands name really just emerged out of the long history. Ernie Rossi was with Erickson, and they were using the two hands, the mirroring hand, the magnetic hands, all those things. I mean, that goes way back to Mesmer and there. So I think the actual name is just one of those brands that doesn't necessarily is not necessarily the most ideal, but but it certainly is that we use the hands as mirrors, but not mirrors as in equal reflection. We use them more like Alice in the Looking Glass, where one is the opposite of the other. One is the other. So but the idea of mirroring hands, the concept of it is really based around complexity theory. In the book we make a chapter, is that everything that we can see, and for those interested in other things, we have this term, the phenotype. This thing that we are able to observe, that is the emergent property after everything has happened, after all the elements have combined, and they produce then the phenotype, this thing we observe. So the emotions, the behaviors, the words they say, the movements they make, they're all end-point expressions. So what we want to do is we want to find out what's underneath that. But because they're the emergent properties all gathered up together, it's a bit like, I mean, a human being is made up of heart and lungs and liver and muscles, and surgeons need to get in and differentiate the elements, to separate the elements a little bit. Now, this has been, there's another therapeutic process which is kind of like this, but it's a little bit impositional, and that's parts therapy, where the therapist will say, talk to the part and talk to the thing. We're sort of in that frame of thinking, but that's I think it's very good, but I think there are some errors in the way they're thinking. So what we will do, for example, is we will just, once we've drawn attention, and I'll show how that's done in just a moment, but let's say someone has come for pain. They've got terrible pain.
Yes.
Now, that pain could be a million things. It may be something very apparent. I have a pain in my shoulder, but goodness gracious me, that could go back to something that happened when they were 4 years old, and a trauma and so on. But so let's put the pain. I wonder which hand, we get the hands separated and focused, and I'll show you that in a sec. But we say, wonder which hand receives that pain. And I don't even send it into a hand. I just say, I wonder which hand receives it. Then the client, if the process is they're ready and it's suitable, it will receive. Now here's the beautiful part of it. You go, yes, and that hand, and maybe it'll move away or down or do something, it'll do whatever. And you say, I wonder what's in the other hand. Is that the not pain? What is the thing that is not the pain? And of course, there we find clients discovering, once they've got the pain out of the way, they're able to see their resilience and their strengths and their capacities. Or maybe they go back and they find the cause. They find what lies underneath it. And this very simple process is something that human beings do naturally. And we've been doing it naturally for thousands and thousands of years.
Yeah.
But we need the interpersonal engagement with a collaborator to co-create the experience, because I'm having trouble because of blockages, difficulties, interruptions, these things that get into systems that disturb. And I need another system to interact with me and interplay with me to enable me, even if that system just says to me, put your hands to one side, put the pain in one side and put the not pain in the other.
Yeah.
I never thought of that. So I never thought of differentiating. So it is quite a simple process. And I'll just, for those who are listening, you can right now, I don't even need to be there, because it is useful, of course, to be there when we get to serious therapeutic processes. But if you just look at your hands now, those who are listening, just if you're prepared to, and I wonder if you would like to just experience this. And there you see, I'm inviting. No one has to. And look at those hands really closely. But really get curious and interested. And I always find it fascinating every time I do this, my hands have more wrinkles. Unpleasant. And as you're looking at those hands, there's an enormous amount of real estate in your brain, which is firing up more than any other real estate area in your hands. The hands are huge in the brain. And I wonder, as you're doing that, if you can feel one hand slightly different from the other. I don't know, is it a bit warmer or cooler or heavier maybe? And you know what's even more surprising? I wonder if one of those hands does a little twitch or does a little tickle to say, oh, I'm the one. Now, we'll stop at that point, because now we're beginning, for those who've had that sense of the one hand being different than the other, and particularly those that have that, what we call an idiomotor response, where there's a non-directed action of the hand taken from the implicit self, you are already in a state of focused attention that people call hypnosis, or people call a hypnotherapeutic state. You've altered reality. You've probably thought that was very quick, so time has changed. There's a number of elements. You also might have found yourself swallowing, which is talking about the changes going on in the vagus nerve, which is the vagal tone is altering when you relax and focus like that. So there we go. There's a little run through not of what it is, and a little tiny experience of, oh gosh, I did feel like one hand was heavier than the other.
Yeah. I find it very interesting. You just gave the bridge now to the neurobiological backgrounds. I mean, this is a big thing. We cannot tell that in some minutes, but you just talked about that the hands are, in my words, represented in the neurobiological system with a very big area that does not, this is very different to the area that they have on the body, you know?
Yeah.
There is much more play, say, for them, and that makes it so important. So what are some neurobiological backgrounds, especially of course for working with parts theory? I hope we see you then here when the congresses go on in Europe, that you can show your work here.
Yes, I look forward to it enormously. I really enjoy working in Europe. Some wonderful people. But so the neurobiology is really interesting. So certainly the hands are such a useful tool. I mean, it's a Gestalt therapy. You are putting the difficulty outside of yourself. Now that, for a start, is a very good way of maintaining a safe environment in therapy. Sometimes when we go inward, say, think deeply into, what you're going, well, you run the risk of re-traumatizing, which is a great problem. But once you put them out in the hands, I can simply ask someone to throw it away. There's so many avenues that I can do. And what's beautiful about it is different from Gestalt, where you might put the negative influence in a chair, or you might put them externally in the room. You kind of lost control of them. But when they're in your hands, you can move your hands away, you can move them close, you can move them to the left or right and up and down. And when you look at the sensory cortex, the arms, when you look at the little the sensory motor homunculus that they make, their arms are tiny. So your hands can actually feel like they're floating in space, like they're floating outside there. Now, the other part of the body, which has got a very large amount of real estate in the sensory motor cortex, are the lips and tongue.
Yeah.
So, and certainly we do a lot of therapy with our lips and tongue. We do romantic therapy with our lips, with kissing and engaging. We do sensorial therapy with our tongue through taste, and but it's not something that is suitable in psychotherapy. It's really a good idea not to be kissing your clients or licking them. This possibly would get you in jail. So we'll use the hands, I think, is much wiser. But the hands are there. Now, what we also have is, by focused attention, what we do is we shift ourselves out of self-directed, so making decisions and forcing actions by our prefrontal cortex, and we slide into an area of the brain that we call the default mode network. So this is where there's a greater sense of imagination. There's also a greater sense of the inner body through what's called the insula, which is part of the default mode network. But there's more to the process than just default mode network. Is that what you do is you also disconnect the motor system from direct action. So you can actually imagine all kinds of things going on without necessarily acting those out, which is similar to your dreams. What we get is we then get, we tap into what's called the ideodynamic response. David Cheek early on called it the ideomotor response. And there was a lot of that, and there still is that work of using one finger to raise to say yes and another finger to say no. And this is okay, but it is, from the client responsive perspective, that's a lot of imposition. Your client has to accept a lot of instruction and agreement with you in order to do that. And frankly, I'm just more comfortable for them to work with their hands. And I say, how does that feel? And they go, oh, yes, that feels really strong. Well, there you go. I've got my yes. Or if they say, no, I'm not feeling anything good, there's your no. And so it actually is not such a big a deal to extract a yes or a no from someone, from their implicit self, through just these little body movements. Now, it's not unusual for the hands to actually exit the experience, for them to fall down by people's sides, but they continue this engagement. And it's also not unusual for the hands to begin to take on quite a life of their own. But the most amusing one was a client who was sitting there and her fingers were just barely moving, but they were really going through quite a lot of this tiny activity. So I was paying attention, And we always acknowledge, yes, I see your fingers moving. And in our biggest imposition on the client is just to check in with them. And we use a little statement. We'll just say, now, I'm wondering if you want to share a word or two of what's going on, but only if you feel it will help the therapy, or perhaps you just want to continue privately with your own work. Now, if they start talking, then they want to share with you. If they don't talk, then they're working. So the answers come very readily. Anyway, her fingers were doing this little tiny movements, and I would just say, yes, very good, I see that. Then there might be another few minutes of silence. Anyway, she eventually returned to the space of the room and focused her attention back on me. And she said, "Oh my gosh, I hope everything was all right." And I went, "No, everything was fine. It was a beautiful experience." And I think so, but I was just so worried I was going to hit something, hit the furniture or damage something. And I said, "Oh." She said, "Because my arms, I mean, they were flailing about all over the place." And I went, and this was what it felt like with you. So I allowed her to have that experience.
Yeah.
And then when I felt that it was appropriate, I said, "I do want to share with you that those movements were actually on the outside, very minor." And she went, "Oh, wow." And I briefly explained that neuroscientific aspect of the fact that you can have a disconnect between broad motor action and what we call premotor action. And it gets a little bit complicated for general discussion, but that's a really important point. And the other one, of course, is the one I just alluded to earlier, with the vagus nerve. So vagal tone is improved simply by the act of relaxation and of focused attention. And vagal tone then moves in. It will alter the heart rate. It may be the breathing that alters first, which then alters vagal tone. So your heart rate variation can improve. And this actually, in the recent work that we're doing in the book, we talk about how this relates to gut activity. And in fact, I found that there's really interesting work how this moves all the way out to the skin and from the skin back. So we have a skin brain and brain skin sort of reaction as well. But
Wonderful.
that's interesting. The skin actually can create a similar set of biochemicals as the HPA axis. And it can actually activate the adrenal glands to produce adrenaline from the skin. It is its own brain. Cool. Really interesting.
Thank you for this good example with that client, because I had prepared a question about example. Now we got one. That's wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah.
You talked a little bit about Potts theory, about neurobiological things, about the connection of the hands to the neurobiological system. Now let's a bit talk about hypnosis, because you just said in one sentence there is some context to hypnotic techniques or to clinical hypnosis. Of course, hypnosis is a wild thing, and many people are talking about it. But I think you speak about a professional hypnosis, like you work with, and in the tradition of Milton Erickson or somehow. What is the real role of hypnosis in all these client responsive processes?
Because hypnosis is a fascinating thing. It's got schools of thought. It's got schools of definition. And it's really, again, just a natural process. In fact, one of the elements that we bring forward in the whole mirroring hands approach is that every therapy that exists already exists within human beings. Somebody simply observed it and then explored it and expanded it and enriched it. EMDR, for example, Francine Shapiro talks about the fact the reason she discovered it because her eyes moved, and that seemed to help her experience. But I was doing a class in Portugal, and at the back of the room, one of the participants, I was doing a group exercise, and his eyes were rapidly moving left and right. So much so that at the end of the process, when he came back, I made a special check on him to make sure he didn't have something wrong with his eyes. But no, he didn't at all. He didn't remember his eyes moving enormously. But he said, I began and went into the process with a traumatic concern. And he said, I feel better about it now. So that was just another evidence to me that the therapy will emerge. Now, if I was working one-on-one with him, because I understood the technique and the academic background to EMDR, I would have been able to comfortably go with him and comfortably allow him to continue his process. And I wouldn't have interrupted with my ignorance and say, oh, I'm very worried about your eyes. Are you okay? You know, I would have gone, oh, he's doing EMDR. And I would have shifted into an EMDR type of frame, and I might have brought in something more. I said, I wonder if there's another thought you are having or feeling that you might like to work on and ease now. You know, I might have done something like that. So where were we talking about hypnosis? So hypnosis is just a natural state of moving into a concentrated frame that is different from the concentration you have when you are focusing on reality.
Yeah.
Now, there's many people who've talked about the neurobiology, and I think that's all very good. Look it up. It's probably accurate. We'll find out a new one later. But the most important aspect of it is that if you focus your attention, and many of you already now, if I say to you, are you looking at what's going on around you? And I suspect that a number of you will then suddenly stop and, oh yes, that's right, I'm in my room or I'm in my wherever I'm going, because you've focused in on the language and you've focused in on the dialogue, and so that has taken up. We have a thing called working memory, which only holds a certain number of things at any one time. So there's all kinds of beautiful things about the brain and the body that encourage it to move into states of pause and states of reflective capacity, because it's in those reflective moments, those closed down inner states, which we have turned into practices, and we call them things like mindfulness, we call them meditation. We've done things. So we've, as human beings, we've named them and framed them, but it's always been. And to give you an example of what I'm suggesting, if I say to people mindfulness, that means that you stop doing everything you're doing, or your general activities, and in that stopping, and you can create a focus on something wonderful and inspiring, and it could be your breathing or your heartbeat or your thoughts of loved ones. And then there's a sense of afterwards of feeling very connected and wanting to engage and talk and or perhaps just sit quietly with people but feel really connected. Now, when you think of evolutionary history, when have we stopped, taken in an awesome experience, and after that awesome experience, felt a sense of bigness in the universe and smallness, and then wanted to share that connection with others through food and engagement? And I would suggest to you that experience is called sunset.
Mm-hmm.
And it is imbued in us, it is hardwired in. So mindfulness is totally natural. My question is not the rise in mindfulness, is where did it go? And why did it go? Meanwhile, we bring it back. So that aspect, and Ernie would call mirroring hands hypnosis without hypnosis. Because I've never hypnotized anybody. And in fact, I did a class once where I did actually hypnotize them. And it was quite easy. We all know the things. I directed them to have focus on certain things. I directed them to not be able to move their hands. And they couldn't move their hands and all these things. And then I did the mirroring hands, and I say, I wonder where you want to move them, where they want to go and their hands moved. And it was fascinating how many people said, no, they're the same thing. And I thought, wow, we are so indoctrinated in the therapist being the hero. So I will ask someone to focus on their hands. Their eyes will close if their eyes close. They will move into a deep trance if they move into a deep trance. And when it happens, that's where they need, that is the most appropriate and the best experience for them at that time. And I'll just one quick example. I was doing a workshop in San Francisco, and on the first day, I did a demonstration with somebody who stayed almost with their eyes open, quite just barely a waking trance, that light waking trance that Erickson would talk about. On the second day, she ended up being the subject again. She said, "Oh, I really have to do some more." And she sat down, and actually Ernest was doing he was online, and she did the work. And she went into a deep trance. So for me to have put her into a deep trance on the first day would have been not terrible, but it wouldn't have been correct. It wouldn't have been the best for her. She needed on the first day to be a bit more cognitively observant, but on the second day she was ready, and away she went. And Erickson would do this. He would work with clients and build up this hypnotherapeutic rapport. So walking up to someone on the street and just doing a handshake, getting them to trance and having them fall on the ground, it's fantastic. We can impose anything on anybody, but I must admit I'm not so inclined to do so.
Yeah. You just talked about Ernest Rossi a little bit. I'm looking for it on the time because we just have the 30 minutes full, but it's so interesting.
Okay.
Don't mind. It's absolutely interesting. And I think we have to meet again and talk much more about other things. You wrote this book together with Ernest, and he died last year. So sad. And from here, we could say we're happy that you did it together with him. And then it comes out now in our language, say.
It's beautiful.
I got two more questions just shortly. I mean, I think the co-work with Ernest Rossi was very impressive and very, very important for you. What would you say in one or two sentences or one or two words? What is the real thing that you will never forget? What made Ernest so important for you? One thing you said, hypnosis without hypnosis, but maybe there's something else.
Well, I was his apprentice. I think that was a gift that he gave to me that is irreplaceable. Not just a mentor who taught me stuff. He actually gave me a quest, a continuous quest, always pushing me beyond where I was. And to give you an example, I would send him an email with a paper and my opinions and thoughts about it. And for the first 5 or 6 years, he would write back and say, very good, that's a very good idea. And then he would sort of say, here's where I thought of 20 years ago, and here's all the other references. And then after about 5 or 6 years in, I can remember the email that came back, and it said, Richard, I've never thought of that.
Why, great.
And that was a shift. And I think this is where it was. He felt that in me, he had found someone who was prepared to not just follow him, but to also push the growing edge himself. And so there are a number, I would say maybe 20% of the book are my own ideas that have emerged out, and that's wonderful. And that for him to permit that was, I think, and encouragement was the greatest joy for me.
So we can wish a lot more people to say, I never thought about that, if they are very long experienced and just find new things with younger people and with others. Okay.
Yeah.
Richard, our rituals in the Carl-Auer Sounds of Science interviews is that the last question is there any question or anything that you might have been wished or expected to be talked about and we did not do, because I did not ask that? Is there anything that you say, I just ask it to myself now and give a last statement to it?
I think the one thing that I want to add is Ernest talked a lot about mind-body medicine, the book with David Cheek, as we know, and then a lot of that work looking and talking about the biology, talking about genes and gene expression. And of course, in the last few years, we needed another 20 to work on, perhaps even down to the quantum area. But the thing that I want to say is this understanding this, and we write it in the book, to think in the system, to see yourself as this beautiful, interweaving, self-organizing. Mostly you don't have to do anything. That if the key phrase that I like to use is our job is to give the client the opportunity and the appropriate circumstances, because the human body will naturally move itself to well-being in those circumstances. We have an immune system for our biological health, and we have a mental health immune system for our emotional and psychobiological health. And this is occurring not just in your mind space, not just in your mental space. It is occurring all the way down to your genes that are actually producing new proteins that physically imbue and embed and engage, and you actually become the recovery. And that is what healing is all about. You creating the recovery in physical form within yourself that remains permanent. And I think that is my final gift to the question of my own question.
Thank you very much. That was very important. I think this was missing in all the before. It was in it, but it was not really said in words as you did it now. Thank you very much, Richard, for this and for all the time that you gave us here for Sounds of Science and the people who are listening to us. I hope very much we meet again, not only in the internet, but real life when you can come back to Europe. Feel invited.
Yes.
Feel welcome.
When that little bug goes away. Yes.
Yeah. Take care and stay sane, and hope to see you again soon. Thank you, Richard.
And everybody buy the book.
Yeah, of course. Yes, they will. We do our best, and everybody who does it will say, this was the good invest. I learned so much.
Beautiful. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank
Bye
you.
for now.
Thank you. Ja, Responsivity starts with Curiosity. Und es ist doch durchaus sinnvoll, auch andere Fähigkeiten, die man im Laufe seines Lebens erworben hat, zu nutzen im Dienst von Klientinnen und Klienten in der Psychotherapie, zum Beispiel Schauspielerei, auch wenn es keine direkte Voraussetzung ist für Anwendung von Mirroring Hands. Wir danken an dieser Stelle noch einmal sehr herzlich Richard Hill für die Bereitschaft, mit uns zu sprechen und auch den Zeitunterschied zwischen Australien und Mitteleuropa so galant zu überbrücken. Ja, wir würden uns freuen, wenn ihr natürlich wieder positive Resonanz hinterlasst, wo immer ihr Carl-Auer Sounds of Science hört und verfolgt. Wenn ihr weiterschaut in der Mediathek, mit wem wir alles gesprochen haben, so interessante Gespräche. Und natürlich schaut auch bitte in die Autobahn-Universität. Und dann, frohe Ostern, gute Zeit, bleibt gesund. Carl-Auer Sounds of Science, herzliche Grüße.